He stood still as a statue, and the tomb guard's boots echoed across Arlington's holy ground. 21 steps, turn, and stop. But there was a shadow among the crowd. A man with steely eyes and a rifle stashed away watched and waited. He was just another face to the tourists. Jacob Walsh thought he was a threat to all the tomb stood for. In a single heartbeat, a regular patrol might turn into a fatal standoff, where one wrong action could break the silence of this sacred spot. The next thing that happened would leave the crowd breathless and wreck the plans of the fugitive. Before we get into this story, where are you watching from? Please tell us in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have the notification bell turned on. If you think that principles like honor, bravery, and sacrifice are still important, help us preserve their memory alive. It was a clear autumn morning at Arlington National Cemetery. The air felt pure, and the sunlight turned the white headstones into a shimmering sea of glory. Jacob Walsh stood guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. His navy blue suit was spotless, his kepi hat was exactly right, and his sunglasses showed how calm and respectful the sight was. Every move was exact. 21 steps, a quick turn, 21 seconds of stillness, and then the cycle started over. This wasn't just a job for Jacob. He made a sacred promise to commemorate the dead who had given all for the country he loved. Jacob was 32 years old and had been in the army for 2 tours in the Middle East. He had seen the turmoil of war and felt the weight of choices made in a split second. As a tomb guard, he lived in a world of discipline, where every step was a memorial to those who never came home. Even though he seemed calm, his senses were acute from years of training and instinct. He heard everything, from the rustling of leaves, to the murmur of travelers, to the pounding of his own heart. There was a man in the gathering at the tomb that morning, who didn't belong there. Viktor Morozyov, a 42-year-old wanted man from another country, stood near the edge of the viewing area. His leather jacket was too nice for a tourist. His well-groomed beard and slicked-back hair shouted sophistication, but his worn military boots conveyed a different story, one of violence, missions, and darkness. Interpol sought Viktor for terrorism and weapons smuggling. He was a ghost who had gotten away from the law too many times. He was here today with a plan. His palm rested casually near the pocket where a CZ-75B handgun, customized for silent kills, was waiting. Viktor's gaze followed Jacob's every move, not with the awe of a tourist, but with the icy precision of a predator. He took a few pictures with his camera set up to look like it belonged there, but his main focus was on sightlines, security gaps, and the guard's patrol schedule. He murmured to himself, just loud enough for Jacob to hear some of it over the wind. Symbols of arrogance, American weakness. Jacob didn't care about what they said. He has heard worse, but there was something about Viktor's stance, too controlled, too balanced, that made his gut feel uneasy. Margaret Hayes, a 68-year-old retired librarian and former Army nurse, was leading a group of school youngsters through the cemetery. She had a volunteer cap over her gray hair, but her eyes were as piercing as ever. She had spent years in conflict zones fixing up soldiers and had a sixth instinct for peril. She saw Viktor's strange queries earlier when he hung around her information booth, asking about guard schedules and security cameras with a hint of interest. She felt it again as she watched him hover near the tomb. She moved closer and pretended to fix a leaflet display. When Jacob stopped for a moment during his patrol, she caught his eye. "Jacob, that guy in the leather jacket is asking too many questions. Something's not right." Jacob's countenance didn't change, but he nodded slightly and looked at Viktor. He went back to patrolling, but now all of his senses were focused on the stranger. Viktor moved too slowly and looked overly clinical. Jacob saw the unmistakable bulge under the man's jacket and the slight asymmetry that screamed hidden weapon. His heart rate was stable, but his mind was already figuring out angles, distances, and outcomes. Families, veterans, and tourists made up the crowd. Their voices were a quiet murmur against the solemnity of the tomb. A couple of young people took selfies. A bunch of kids held on to American flags. A group of gray-haired soldiers stood still, their eyes moist with memories. Viktor stepped closer to the tomb's viewing area, and it seemed like he had practiced how to weave between the crowd. He stopped near a low fence and ran his hand along the edge of his jacket. Jacob saw the movement, and his gut told him this wasn't a tourist. This was a warning. "Quite the show you put on here, soldier. All this pomp, all this ceremony, for what? A dying empire." His voice was low but purposeful, directed at Jacob. His accent was smooth, almost neutral, yet it had a steely edge like steel under velvet. Jacob didn't say anything. He had to keep his eyes on a distant point, but he took note of everything. How Viktor's weight shifted to his right leg, the faint smell of gun oil coming from his jacket, and how his fingers trembled near his pocket. People in the crowd started to feel like something was wrong. The young pair frowned and put down their phones. A mother brought her kids closer, and her face got tighter. The veterans looked at each other and stood up straighter. Margaret stood at her booth and watched everything happen, her hand lingering over an emergency call button. She had seen this kind of stress before at field hospitals, where danger was always just a minute away. She pushed the button and moved her body slightly, hoping help would come in time. Victor moved closer and whispered in a voice meant only for Jacob, "You stand here guarding a tomb while your country falls apart. Multicultural chaos, weak leaders, a nation too soft to survive. We see it. We're ready to show the world how weak your symbols are." His hand moved slowly and deliberately to his jacket, like a snake uncoiling. Jacob's heart didn't race. His training took control and it calmed down. He was sure that the following few seconds would change everything. Victor's hand came out, and the sun shone off the blue steel of a CZ-75B pistol. The crowd gasped. A woman held back a scream, and the veterans moved to protect the kids without thinking. Victor held the gun low and didn't aim it yet, enjoying the moment. "Isn't it beautiful?" he remarked, his voice almost reverent. "Modified for accuracy. 15 rounds of truth." He clicked the safety off, and the sound echoed like a thunderclap in the startled hush. "Guard, this is where your ceremony ends. One shot and your sacred tomb becomes a headline." Jacob's eyes stayed front, and his posture was faultless, yet every muscle in his body was tense and ready. He had been ambushed in dusty villages and disarmed rebels in busy markets. This was the same. He kept an eye on Victor's position, which was that of a soldier from Eastern Europe who had changed over the years through Black Ops activity. The handle on the gun was made just for it, and the wear on the barrel suggested that it had been used in real life, not only for practice. Jacob wasn't lying, and Victor wasn't either. The fugitive slowly and dramatically raised the gun, with his finger next to the trigger, which showed that he had received excellent training. "Any last words, guard? Any defense of your precious system? Or will you die like your country, silent, weak, clinging to empty traditions?" The throng was transfixed, a tableau of horror. A child cried softly, hidden in his mother's arms. Margaret's eyes were fixed on Jacob, and she had complete faith in him. The veteran was ready, and one hand was reaching for a cane like it was a gun. Time appeared to go on forever, with each second feeling like an eternity. Victor's finger started to curl toward the trigger, and his eyes sparkled with victory. Then Jacob got up, not the ceremonial movements of a tomb guard, but the deadly accuracy of a soldier. His gloved hand flew out in a flash, grabbing the gun slide with a grip that had been honed through hours of practice. Jacob twisted the weapon before Victor could do anything, and his fingers found the right pressure spots to pull it free. It looked like the gun was gone from Victor's hands, and was now in Jacob's control, as if it had never been his. Jacob moved like a ballet dancer. His thumb touched the magazine release, and the clip fell out and into his other hand. The weight informed him it was full, and the brass rounds shone in the sun. His fingers moved the slide, which sent the round flying out of the chamber in a smooth arc. The 9mm round hit the stone plaza like a bell. Safety on, chamber clear, and weapon locked up, all in less than 3 seconds. The crowd blinked, and some subsequently swore they had only seen a flash of white glove in Victor's empty palm. Victor stood there, his smug expression broken, his fingers reaching for air, and his face contorted from shock to wrath. "You," he yelled, but Jacob cut him off with a calm voice that held the weight of authority. "Model, modified trigger assembly, Montenegro craftsmanship, subsonic ammo, Serbian spring, approximately 2,000 rounds fired based on barrel wear." His glove-covered fingers traced the pistol's frame as he spoke. "You picked the wrong place and the wrong person." Victor lunged, giving up on his plan. But Jacob was ready. He used the handle of the handgun as a pivot and brought the rear sight down in a perfect arc till it hit the bridge of Victor's nose. Blood sprayed as cartilage crunched, leaving stains on the fugitive's leather jacket. Victor staggered, holding his face and speaking in a voice full of pain. Jacob's answer was icy as ice. "You broke my nose. I stopped a threat to this holy ground. The broken nose is not important." Some people cheered, while others were still dazed. Margaret led the kids and families to safety, and her voice stayed calm even though things were crazy. The veterans nodded in agreement, and one said, "That's how it's done, son." Sirens could be heard in the distance, getting louder as the Arlington security team got closer. Jacob kept Victor at bay, and the fugitive's arrogance was gone. His blood dripped down the square like a countdown. "You'll regret this," Victor said, his words garbled by blood. "Everywhere. This isn't over. Jacob's gaze didn't change. It was over the moment you drew that weapon. You didn't notice the silent alarm going off 2 minutes ago, or the cameras catching your face from 6 different angles. Right now, the Metropolitan Police are sealing off every exit. Victor's face went pale as the sirens got louder and police cars screeched to a halt nearby. Jacob kept his position, holding the weapon tightly and standing in a way that was excellent for a ceremony. Armed security guards filled the plaza, handcuffing Victor and pulling him toward a van. A detective came up to Jacob with his notepad in hand. "That was a good move, soldier. Do you have any information on this guy?" Jacob's speech was calm and businesslike. Suspect had a modified CZ-75B, probably from Balkan networks. His stance suggests paramilitary training, Eastern European, maybe Serbian. Check Interpol database. His accent and beliefs matched those of known extremists. The detective's eyebrows went up, but he kept writing quickly. One of his cops ran over with a tablet in hand. "Sir, facial recognition just went off. This guy is Viktor Morozov, who is wanted for a number of attacks in Europe. Interpol has been looking for him for years." The detective nodded sadly. "By tonight, his face will be on every news channel. That nose won't let him hide for long." He looked at the blood path that Victor had left behind. "By the way, nice touch with the rear sight." Jacob's face didn't change. "The CZ-75B sight works when you use the right amount of force. The suspect will need medical help within a few hours, so it's easy to find him." The detective laughed and shook his head. "We'll need a full statement later, but is there anything else?" Jacob's eyes were always on the lookout as they swept the area. "Look into underground clinics in DC's eastern districts. He'll probably go to Balkan expatriate networks for help." As the police blocked off the area, life at Arlington began to calm down. Tourists, who were now a safe distance away, observed as forensic investigators took pictures of the blood trail and found the bullet that had been shot. Margaret walked up to Jacob, her volunteer hat a little crooked, but her eyes were full of pride. She responded quietly, "My husband was a Marine, buried here, unknown to most. You honored him today, Jacob, all of them." Jacob looked her in the eye and spoke softly but firmly. "That's what we do, ma'am, for them." One of the veterans, a thin man with a silver star pin, stepped forward and gave a sharp salute. He said, "Army retired. That was textbook, son. It reminded me of Nam. Stay calm until it's time to move." Jacob returned the salute perfectly. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my job," the veteran said with a smile. "Duty? Hell, you're a great soldier. Things haven't changed since my day." The sun went down and spread deep shadows across the square. Jacob went back to his patrol. 21 steps. Turn. Stop. Like nothing had occurred. His medals shone, and each one told a narrative of service and sacrifice. The crowd was in amazement, and their whispers were suddenly full of admiration. A young boy holding a flag pointing at Jacob. "Is he a superhero, Mom?" His mother smiled through her tears. "Something like that, my love." Jacob thought about the day again, not with pride, but with quiet determination. The tomb was more than just stone and marble. It was the heart of a country, and a memorial of those who had given their lives. Viktor Morozov felt he could mess with it, but he didn't know how strong the guards were. Jacob thought of Margaret's husband, the people whose bodies were buried under the tomb, and the many others who were buried on the hills of Arlington. This was for them. As the police vehicles drove away and Victor's rants faded into the distance, the detective's radio crackled with news. Hospitals were on the lookout for the fugitive, because surveillance cameras had seen him move before. The net was tightening, and Morozov's shattered nose would make him stand out like a beacon. Jacob didn't need to know what happened. He had done what he needed to accomplish. The tomb was protected, and its honor was still intact. The commotion of the day gave way to the tranquil serenity of the cemetery. As the afternoon turned to dusk, Jacob's footsteps made a soothing sound, and each one honored a promise. He thought of the veterans who'd stood with him, of Margaret's steady courage, of the boy with the flag. He didn't serve for glory. He did it for the memory of those who had been before him. He thought of the tomb guard's creed. "I will not fail in my duty. I will not waver." What would you do if you were Jacob? Could you stay calm knowing danger was only a few inches away, and act with such precision when the time came? These men and women protect the heart of our country, not merely with ceremony, but with unbreakable will. Tell us what you think. Have you ever seen someone handle a crisis like this? What does Arlington signify to you? Tell us and commemorate the dead by keeping their stories alive. This is the end of the script, yet Jacob's watch goes on. Dotman 3 steps. Turn. Stop. Each one is a sign of devotion, bravery, and America.